My name is Rebecca Matthews, and what I am about to share with you is something I never thought would happen to me. It is something that shattered the way I viewed my life, my struggles, and the choices I made in secret. It is something that brought me face to face with Jesus Christ Himself, revealing to me a truth so terrifying, so undeniable, that it changed my life forever. I didn't believe in supernatural experiences. I thought that as long as I was a good person, as long as I believed in God and went to church, I would be fine. But I was wrong. And I only realized how wrong I was when I died. I was raised in a Christian home in Texas, in a family that taught me to love God and follow His commandments. Growing up, I never questioned my faith. It was a part of me, something I accepted as truth. I went to church every Sunday, sang hymns, and memorized scripture. But as I got older, faith became more of a routine than a relationship. I married my high school sweetheart, Mark, when I was 23, and together we built a life, raising 3 beautiful children. From the outside, my life looked perfect. A devoted wife, a loving mother, a Christian woman. But inside, I was falling apart. My husband worked long hours as a civil engineer, often traveling for weeks at a time. At first, I told myself that I could handle it, that it was just part of the sacrifice we had to make for our family. But as time went on, the loneliness began to eat away at me. I spent my days tending to the house, running errands, making sure the kids got to school on time. I did everything I was supposed to do, but something was missing. I felt invisible, unappreciated, and empty. Nights were the hardest. Lying in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, the silence would press down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. I prayed, but I felt nothing. I read my Bible, but the words felt hollow. God seemed distant, like He was watching from afar but never really listening. That's when it started. At first, it was innocent, just a way to relax, to escape the stress of the day. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It was normal, right? Everyone had needs. It wasn't like I was being unfaithful. My husband was gone, and I was alone. What harm could it do? But what started as an occasional indulgence became something more. Something I depended on. I would wait until the house was quiet, until the kids were asleep, and then I would give in to the temptation. Each time, I promised myself it would be the last. Each time, I told myself that God understood, that He knew my struggles, that He wouldn't judge me for something so small. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The shame came quickly afterward. It always did. That awful, gnawing guilt that sat in the pit of my stomach, reminding me that I wasn't as strong as I pretended to be. I would cry, whisper prayers of repentance, but I never really changed. I was stuck in a cycle, a prison of my own making, convincing myself that it was harmless while knowing in my heart that it was pulling me further and further from God. And then on November 4th, 2017, my world came crashing down. That morning, I woke up restless. I had barely slept, my mind consumed with worries about the bills, the kids, the loneliness that had become my constant companion. I felt heavy, burdened by something I couldn't explain. I got out of bed, wrapped a sweater around myself, and looked out the window. The sun hadn't even risen yet, the sky still blanketed in darkness. I needed to clear my head. I needed to breathe, so I decided to go for a run. Running had always been my escape, a way to release the tension that built up inside me. Maybe if I ran long enough, fast enough, I could outrun the thoughts that tormented me. I laced up my shoes, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the streets silent. I jogged through my neighborhood, my breath coming in steady, rhythmic exhales. I tried to focus on the sound of my feet hitting the pavement, tried to drown out the thoughts that kept whispering in the back of my mind. But they wouldn't go away. I told myself I would do better, that I would pray more, that I would stop making excuses for my sins, that I would finally be the woman God wanted me to be. I didn't see the car until it was too late. One moment, I was running, lost in thought. The next, headlights filled my vision, blinding me with their intensity. The sound of screeching tires, a split second of sheer terror, and then impact. The force of the collision sent me flying through the air, my body weightless for a brief moment before crashing onto the pavement. The world around me blurred, my vision dimming, my breath catching in my throat. I felt a sharp, searing pain radiate through my entire body, and then nothing. But I was still aware. I opened my eyes, but I wasn't on the ground. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't even in my body. I was floating above the street, looking down at the scene below. My body was lying motionless in the middle of the road, twisted in ways that didn't seem natural. Blood pooled beneath my head, dark and glistening under the glow of a street lamp. A woman had stopped her car and was running toward me, her face pale with horror. A man was frantically dialing 911, his hands shaking as he struggled to form words. I could hear them. I could see them, but they couldn't see me. Panic set in. Was I dreaming? Was I hallucinating? I tried to speak, to move, but it was as if I was weightless, untethered from the world I had always known. And then, before I could make sense of what was happening, I felt something pulling me away. It was not gentle. A force unlike anything I had ever felt yanked me backward, as if an invisible hand had reached into my very soul and dragged me into the abyss. The world around me vanished, swallowed by a darkness so deep, so consuming, that it felt as though I had been thrown into a void where nothing existed. There was no light, no warmth, no sound, just endless, suffocating blackness. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. And then, out of the silence, I heard something. A voice. But it was not kind. It was not merciful. It was filled with accusation. She belongs to us. Terror unlike anything I had ever known gripped me. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them, dark presences moving around me, watching, waiting. I knew, in that moment, that I was in the presence of something evil, something that had been waiting for me. I struggled, I fought, but the more I resisted, the stronger their grip became. And just when I thought I was lost forever, just when I thought there was no way out, I heard another voice. A voice that silenced everything. A voice that shook the very foundations of the darkness around me. Rebecca! It was not loud, yet it thundered through the void with unimaginable power. It was not harsh, yet it carried authority that could not be denied. The darkness recoiled. The voices stopped. And then light. A blinding, radiant light erupted from nowhere, flooding the abyss with a warmth so pure, so powerful that the shadows shrieked and fled. And in the center of that light stood a figure. A man. No, more than a man. And in that moment I knew. It was Jesus. My entire being trembled as I looked at him. There was no doubt in my soul that I was standing before Jesus Christ himself. His presence was unlike anything I had ever known. Overwhelming yet peaceful, powerful yet gentle. His eyes, deeper than the ocean and filled with endless love, locked onto mine. And in that instant, every sin I had ever committed, every moment of weakness, every excuse I had ever made lay bare before him. There was nowhere to hide. I was completely exposed, my soul stripped of every illusion. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was fall to my knees before him, overcome by an unbearable mix of sorrow and longing. I wanted to beg for forgiveness, but before I could even form the words, he spoke. "Rebecca," he said, his voice resonating through my very core. "I have seen you before you were even born. I have loved you through every moment of your life, even the ones where you turned away from me." I choked on a sob. My mind flashed back to every night I had cried myself to sleep, to every moment I had felt unseen, unheard, unworthy. And yet, here he was, calling me by name. "But Lord," I stammered, "I've failed you. I've been weak. I've done things I know were wrong, things I thought didn't matter. How can you love me after everything?" Jesus' expression did not change. He did not look away, nor did he scold me. Instead, he lifted his hand, and suddenly, everything around us shifted. A vision unfolded before me. I saw my life from a perspective I had never seen before. I saw myself as a little girl, innocent and full of faith, trusting in God with all my heart. I saw the first time I doubted, the first time I compromised, the first time I convinced myself that something small, something secret, wasn't really a sin. Then I saw the chains. They were wrapped around me, thick, black, pulsing with an eerie darkness. Every time I had chosen temporary pleasure over true connection with God, the chains multiplied, tightening their grip around me. I gasped in horror. I had done this to myself. What I thought was freedom had been nothing more than bondage. What I thought was harmless had been a slow, creeping destruction of my soul. "Every choice leads you either closer to me or further away," Jesus said, his voice filled with sadness. "You thought this sin was small, but sin is never small. It weakens the heart. It dulls the spirit. It blinds you to the truth." I collapsed, weeping. I didn't know it was this serious. Jesus knelt beside me, lifting my chin so I had no choice but to look into his eyes. "You knew, Rebecca," he said gently but firmly. "I whispered to you. I tugged at your heart, but you silenced me with excuses. And yet, even now I do not condemn you. I offer you freedom." Hope flickered in my heart, but doubt lingered. How can I be free? I asked. "The chains, how do I break them?" Jesus stretched out his hands, and for the first time I noticed the scars. Deep, unmistakable wounds from the nails that had been driven into his flesh. The price he had paid, the weight of my sins, all of them, had already been borne by him. "You cannot break them," he said. "But I can." The moment he spoke those words, the chains around me shattered. The darkness that had bound me for so long evaporated as if it had never been there. I gasped, my entire soul feeling lighter than it had in years, perhaps for the first time in my life. Jesus helped me to my feet. "Go and sin no more," he said. "Live in the freedom I have given you." Suddenly, everything around me faded. The light, the presence of Jesus, the overwhelming peace, it all began to blur. I felt myself being pulled backward, drawn away from the heavenly realm and back into my body. I woke up with a violent gasp, the sterile scent of a hospital room filling my senses. Machines beeped around me. My husband, Mark, sat at my bedside, eyes red-rimmed, gripping my hand as if he never wanted to let go. "Rebecca," he choked out, relief flooding his face. "You're awake." I blinked in confusion, memories flooding back all at once. The accident, the darkness, the vision, Jesus. "I died," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I met him. I met Jesus." Tears streamed down my husband's face as he nodded. "The doctors said you were gone for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Rebecca. But you came back." I knew then that I couldn't keep what I had seen to myself. This wasn't just for me. It was a warning, a wake-up call, a second chance. From that day forward, I dedicated my life to breaking the chains that had once bound me, not just in myself, but in others. I started speaking out, sharing my testimony with anyone who would listen. I no longer cared about embarrassment or shame. The truth was too important. I saw how many people were trapped in the same cycle I had been, justifying sin, thinking it was harmless, believing they had more time to get right with God. But the truth is, we don't know how much time we have. I had thought I had years left, but in a single moment, my life ended. And if it weren't for the mercy of Jesus, I wouldn't have come back. So now I ask you, what choices are you making in secret? What sins are you justifying? What chains are you allowing to grow stronger around your soul? Jesus is offering you freedom today, right now. But the choice is yours. Will you accept His hand and walk in true freedom? Or will you stay trapped in the cycle of false satisfaction? He is calling you. Don't ignore Him. The time is now. Choose Him. Choose freedom.